a head start.
Breathing is good.
It is very good.
Yeah, one of our clients we were chatting to just before has had really, really bad asthma all week, so she's been trying to get a few jobs done, but she's been really struggling with it.
Yeah.
Poor sweetie.
Well, it's a terrible thing, asthma. I mean, it is really something that, in many cases, almost epidemic. In the community, isn't it?
It is a bit. You know, it's 1 in 8 kids these days. Poor old asthma, and you do wonder. Yeah,
Kids.
it's quite amazing. So many kids have just got their puffers in their, lunch boxes as a way of getting through the day.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of anxiety is looked at as asthma these days as well. You know, there's so much, I don't remember really anxious kids when I was, it didn't seem to be a big thing when I was a kid.
You should say that, because I was just saying that to my wife. I said about worrying about things. I said, I never used to worry about this sort of rubbish when I was at school.
Yeah.
And she said, hang on a minute, let's be serious about it. You're looking at things through rose-coloured glasses now.
Yeah.
Because you're worried about things, but the kids today at school seem to be so uptight about things.
There's really huge stuff going on in kids these days. We treat kids for everything from panic attacks and anxiety to suicidal thoughts to, full-on depression. It's really scary. And the fact that it's happening so much more these days is a bit of a worry. You sort of think, okay, well, what's going on with our nervous systems? That this is so common. 1 in 3 Aussies tend to be going through these things at one time in their life. It's not like 1 in 10 or 1 in 20. It's a huge proportion of Aussies that are struggling. But kids. And actually there was a study put out by the, I'm guessing, but the EPA in America, so the Environmental Protection Agency, and what they were looking at was particular heavy metals in the environment and how they are finding that it's definitely affecting the neurological when we're being born, so when we're being created in the mother's womb, how these toxins within the body is affecting the way that the brain and the nervous system is being created. And it's quite neat to read the article. I put it on our New Leaf Natural Therapies Facebook page yesterday, shared it, and because it's interesting having someone big like that, the EPA, and it's got about 12 major substances listed, the usual things like methyl mercury and lead, and there's a few pesticides in there, and basically things that are known to be neural interrupters, so they stop the way, because I think that's part of it. If you're thinking clearly and you're thinking happily and your nerves are actually functioning the way they're supposed to be, you have a thought, you sort it out. You don't keep on stressing about it over and over again. These neural interrupters, what they end up doing is they attach to the edges of the nerve. So just say lead, mercury, cadmium, aluminium, whatever. So they attach to the edges of the nerves, and that means that the nerves aren't sparking the way they're supposed to be. And what's supposed to happen is you have a thought, you go, oh gee, I hope nothing bad happens to me today. But really, let's face it, the thought should stop there, instead of the brain then going, oh my goodness, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen, and then thinking about each one as if it's actually going to happen. Really quite interesting.
But you just said before that a lot of these toxins are put in place in the womb.
Yes.
And well, okay, so if that is the case,
yes,
how do you exit it from the child's body?
Yeah, and it's a challenge, but things like one of our products is zeolite. So basically it's it's a problem because once it's in the brain, it's in a load of fat. Our brain is 70% fat. So you have to actually get a substance that will get into the brain and start detoxing the brain. A lot of detoxifying products, things like glutathione and lipoic acid and silymarin and stuff like that, they will always clean out the bloodstream first, because the blood is, the lifeblood of the body will always clean that up first. To actually get something into the brain is a bit more challenging. When we started using this product called NCD about, it's probably 10 or 12 years ago at the time, and there was quite a huge people coming back saying, well, I've given it to my son with this or my daughter with this, how come they're getting improvement? They were just doing it for general detoxification because they'd heard that detoxing could be good. But they were getting really big improvement. So what we find is, if you're on the right detoxification product, and this particular, have you heard of zeolites?
No, I can't.
So they're basically a crystal. So it's in the Earth's crust, and what they do in the Earth's crust is sop up toxins. So around Chernobyl, going back whenever that was, the 80s, they crushed up a whole bunch of zeolites and they put it around Chernobyl to help to sop up the the radiation, sorry. So basically, zeolites, that's what they do. And when they're in the environment, they are sopping up BPAs and pesticides and all our delightful heavy metals and things. So you can imagine, in order to take them into the human body, they have to be cleansed properly, and a lot of them aren't cleansed. A lot of places you can buy cheap zeolite that's been crushed up, whack into water, and sold at a song.
I mean, what do? You walk into the chemist or wherever, and you say, "Hey, listen, I want a bottle of zeolite."
Yeah, well, they'll give you some. Trust me, they'll have it on the shelf. But if it's not cleansed, it'll do you nothing. It will do you no good whatsoever.
So how do you know that you're buying the right product?
You've got to get it from a naturopath who actually gets it from a source that know they go through that process, and that's what we do. So I actually know the guy who developed the detoxification process for this. In Australia, a lot of ours, and it's a real shame because we order it in from America because I know the process. There's been studies done on some of the Australian ones and none of them have been fully cleansed. No one's spending that because it costs a lot of money to set up the detoxification facility. So at this stage, I've not found an Australian one that's actually fully cleansed. But anyway, what it does, it's a negatively charged mineral and it sops up positively charged toxins in the body. So it starts with the big baddies, the things like lead, mercury, cadmium, aluminium. And in fact, the studies that have been done show that that's the order that these heavy metals are detoxed from the body. But it starts with the blood first. So it gets into the bloodstream, and then once the blood is clean, then it will get into the surrounding tissue, so the lymphatic tissue, the muscles, that sort of thing. Once all that's cleaned, it starts getting into the brain. Now that's the theory, but we also know that a lot of kids improve well and truly because it takes about 4 months to get through the blood, the lymph and the muscles.
Okay, but right, you've got this product, right, which is absorbing the toxins in the body.
Yep.
And so therefore the product is then full of the toxins.
That's right.
How the hell do you get rid of the product?
You pee and poo it out. 60% through the bowels, 40% through the urine. Yeah. So, and it's out of the body within 7 to 9 hours.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's been heaps of studies done on it. Yeah, and the reason it was developed was actually more for cancer. The guy was trying to develop a product that helped people to get through chemo and radiation. And what they found... We're talking molecules here, but each molecule of zeolite kills a molecule of cancer because cancer is also a negatively charged mineral. So obviously you need quite big doses. But one of my gurus that I think I've mentioned before, Charles Krebs, he's one of my kinesiology gurus. Love Charles, and he knew one of the guys that was in a 4th stage cancer trial, and once again we're going back about 10 years ago, and these people were on a minimum of 60 drops a day of zeolite, and they all, I think about 78% of them made it through, they got through the last 2 months, because of course when you're 4th stage cancer you basically have about 2 months to live, the prognosis is pretty ratty at that point, but about 2 years later about 78% of them were all still alive. So it's quite, we've used it for cancer. I've never had the same success with people when they have used other zeolite products. And so that's just obviously my experience over the last 12 years, but I've found that to be absolutely true. So I get really challenged. I like to really make sure someone has a good product if they're trying to do something positive for their health. If someone's just using it like a multivitamin, then, I suppose it's the same as everything.
Yeah, but there's no point in spending money if you buy something that's not going to work.
No, there's not. And it is a real challenge because that is what zeolite does. It sops up toxins. So if it's not cleansed, it won't be sopping up toxins in your body. It can actually be adding toxins to your system. Okay, so that's a real issue.
We were initially talking about young people.
Yeah, so kids. It's one of the things you can easily use on kids. A detox dose for adults is about 30 drops, but some of our kids with, really horrendous things like, full-on depressions and autism and Asperger's and all these things where parents are really struggling with their kids. And we have found that it takes a few months, but what ends up happening is that the whole nervous system starts to be less fractious. They start to be able to handle things more easy. They start to be able to cope with life better. And I'm sure that part of it is zeolites also sop up cortisol and adrenaline, noradrenaline, that sort of thing. It's really, so those stress hormones, if we have too many of them in our system, then they end up attaching to your cell membranes again. I think I've said before, each cell membrane in your body, and you've got trillions of cells, each cell membrane has about 500,000 receptor sites on it. And those receptor sites are for everything. They're for things like magnesium and zinc and calcium and B12 and iron, but they're also for things like serotonin, dopamine, adrenaline, so feel-good hormones. But they're also for things like anger hormones, anxiety hormones, depression hormones. So it depends on the number of things that are attached to your cell membranes as to how you respond to stress. So someone who's been suffering depression or anxiety a long time will have a lot, they're called neuropeptides, they'll have a lot of these stress, anxiety, depression neuropeptides attached to their cell membranes, which is why they can be having an absolutely fine day. Someone says something, it triggers something in their brain, and all of a sudden they're off. And they know that, okay, well, here I am, I'm going to be rotten for the next few days, I'm in the dumps and I can't get out. It's because the cells are already primed for that sort of stress.
But there's nothing worse than somebody, we were only talking about this as a family the other day, and there's nothing worse than when somebody is suffering, and I use that word because it's probably the strongest word you can use, suffering, depression, to turn around and say, oh, look, just put your socks up.
Oh, absolutely. And there's nothing they can do about it a lot of the time. It's great when they're 2 years old and you can say, here, have a toy, and it stops them crying, and but wouldn't it be lovely if we could do that with our 30-year-old cousin or someone? Yeah, that's right. That'll turn things around. It's not the same these days, and I think you're right. It's much bigger these days, and I think part of it is because I think we're thinking about things more. So I think we're thinking more about the future. I think we've got more of those physical reminders about how challenging the world is, on YouTube, on Facebook, on TV, all of these sort of things. And we're not going to go backwards technology-wise. Our brains are going to take 10,000 years to catch up to where we are now. It's not going to be easy to navigate through this. So we have to, therefore, do something different.
Yeah, I guess the whole thing is that our view of the world is prescribed by Dr. Google.
It's true. And the amount of people who come into me and they say, well, I've been doing some research on my thing. And I have no problem with people having done that, because I like people to know what's going on in their body. I had one guy ring me up just recently, and it was really neat to talk to him because he was checking out my knowledge on the phone, when he wanted to have a quick chat to me between clients. So he was checking out my knowledge, and he said something like, tell me in 2 sentences or less, tell me in about 2 sentences what you would do for chronic fatigue, which of course is really funny because chronic fatigue is so multifaceted. It could be a million things going on. It can be the thyroid, it can be old infections, it can be mitochondrial disorder, it can be chronic iron deficiency, or, there's a million things that can be going on. It can be good old adrenal fatigue or liver toxicity, or, it can be just about anything. Nonetheless, so that's sort of why we do testing at the clinic, to have a look at all these things. And same with kids, by the way, with the heavy metal toxicity and stuff, we can't do our heavy metal testing on kids under 14, but if we do the mother, that gives us a fairly good indication about how toxic the poor little kids will be, because it all gets through the placenta, unfortunately, these days.
Why? Why can't you do it in kids under 14?
Oh, because the machine doesn't allow it. It's not programmed for it. So it's not, I think at the end of the year, hopefully we'll be getting a computer upgrade that'll allow it, but at the moment we can't, because it just doesn't do it. I'm not sure why. Yeah, so there's so many angles to everything, and when we're looking at things like, depression, anxiety, panic attacks. Have you ever been that sort of a person?
Yeah, I suppose I have been in some respects. I've got to admit, like everybody, you get downers.
Yeah.
You have days when you're downers, and according to my wife, don't you fall down that black hole again.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I went to a seminar, funnily enough, it was a positive thinking seminar, it was called, anyway. So I was at that on the weekend with my mum, and it was funny, and I love my mum to bits, but being with her at a seminar was really interesting because it triggered all my daughter stuff, having my mum sitting next to me. My mum's not a shrinking violet, she's sort of fairly opinionated, and she's a Scorpio, and, people love her or hate her, and because you can't ignore her. And she's one of those people. And it's sort of interesting because it really triggered all my daughter stuff being with her. And we kept chatting about that in the breaks because I was really aware it was going on. There was nothing I could do about it, but I was aware that I was behaving like a 9-year-old, in some, I was just aware of that. And it was funny because we were starting to talk through things at this seminar about where we are in life and where we wanted to go and what was your 5-year plan and all this sort of things. And then you start thinking about where you actually are. And I think this is the sort of thing that people are taught to do these days as well, and it can make people depressed. You know, there doesn't feel like a huge optimistic future for kids. They're told that they might have 5 to 10 careers in their life. You know, who wants to go off and study for 4 years at university when you think, well, is that going to be a waste of 4 years of my life if I'll be doing something different in 10 years?
But I think one of the big problems too is the fact that these days, and you know, I hate to say it, but kids are told you can do anything.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, reality says that you can't do.
Yeah.
You can't be. I mean, you know, you can't be the President of the United States.
Yeah.
Or you can't be Madonna or Rihanna
Yeah.
or somebody, because there's only one of them.
Yes. Yeah.
You can just hope to achieve your best potential. I guess that's what I'm thinking.
And financially, you can't change every so often as well. You know, we're hiring a receptionist at the moment, and the amount of people who have applied, who have started natural therapies at some stage, and then they've said, I ran out of money. You know, like you start courses and you go, $800 a subject, there's 32 subjects, yada, yada, yada. You go, oh, how am I going to do that? So I think it is one of these things where we're being told one thing. It's fine if you're just going to work at Coles or Woolies or KFC or something. That doesn't cost you anything to get into it and to move through. But I think kids are really being challenged a lot these days. And I think that even things like their diet's not good enough to support their brain, to support better outcomes. There's so much to it. And of course, 1 in 3 kids is, and I'm not picking on C-section, but one in 3 kids is C-section these days. And what we find is that can inhibit a particular reflex called a Moro reflex. So it's something that's supposed to be gone at 4 months old, and it stimulates a fight and flight response in kids. And with, you know, just all sorts of things. I think everything's more challenging these days. You know, we're not going to go back 20 years ago. It's just not going to happen. So, you know...
I wish we could.
Yeah, but it's not going to happen. So it's about helping kids' brains to really work with what they've got these days. You know, change the diet, start getting the good things into their diet, start changing... And even getting kids involved with things like yoga and meditation and stuff like that earlier on. So at least they build some tools in their toolkit that they can use in those times of stress. And hopefully that sort of thing, and it probably won't be, but hopefully that sort of thing would start being integrated into schools at some stage, because there's more and more studies coming out about how good meditation is for prevention of so many health disorders these days.
Well, once again, Madonna, extremely interesting to talk to you. And, you know, the funny part about this program is that we say we're going to talk about X, Y, Z.
I know.
And it digresses.
It does a little bit.
But the mere fact of the matter is, it's interesting to do that rather than have a formulated, you know, let's talk about this disease or let's talk about that disease.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to just look at things in general, and your organisation, of course, helps people in many ways to look at things and put things into some sort of perspective in their life and in their health issues.
That's right.
So I guess the bottom line is, how do they contact you? Where are you? And what do you offer?
Okay. So if someone came into us with any of the stuff we've been talking about today or anything else, naturopathy is basically like talking to your doctor. You know, we go through your health disorders, we work out what the best plan for you is. So we do naturopathy and kinesiology and reflexology and remedial massage and Chin-Iseng abdominal massage and microcurrent, which calms the nervous system down, and Reiki, intuitive energy healing, and then we do a whole bunch of naturopathic testing on top of that. So we're quite a well-rounded clinic for what people might need. When we start working with children, you know, there's less testing we do. A lot of kids are, you know, they don't want to pass that finger over for a drop of blood. But, you know, but there's lots we can do for kids. We'd have to treat 30% kids in our clinic. It's really quite a huge area of concern for us and what we can do. So where we are, we're in 94 Edith Street, Wynnum. Our phone number, and I think Annette and Gabby are on the phone this afternoon, the number is 3348 6098. We have lots on Facebook, so we've got New Leaf Natural Therapies Facebook and page and group, and we do lots and lots of things. So there's about 5 prackies in our clinic, and we're all experts in our own little area. So really, when you ring up, trust the girls with what they may suggest for you, because and if you open up to them, actually tell them a little bit of your story, they'll be able to target you to the best practitioner you know, at the time. Because quite often I'll see someone and I'll be sitting down for 5 minutes and someone's telling me about, say, you know, their 5 years of IBS issues and, you know, the bloating, and they're in pain 70% of the day, and I'll think, oh man, if only I'd known that, I might have booked in for, say, a live blood screening or a Chinese abdominal massage. You know, I might have done something a bit differently. But if people don't, and you can imagine not everyone wants to, but if you're willing and open to actually chat a little bit about your health on the phone to the girls, not life story, but just a little bit, then they can really target what would be best for your first appointment to get the best for you.
All right, well, we look forward to the pleasure of your company again next week. Before I lose my voice, I don't know. Anyway, Madonna, it's really great to have you in the studio, because it's always good fun. When I say good fun, it's always a learning curve for all concerned. And as we said, we look forward to the pleasure of your company again next Thursday, and Lorraine will be back next Thursday.
Wonderful.
And I'm going to speak to her and I'm going to tell her that we've got to stick to what we intended to talk about.
It could happen.
And there were 2 issues we were going to discuss today, and we didn't discuss either of them, so we will discuss them next week.
Excellent.
One is gout, and the other is that horrible man thing called prostate.
Yes. Beautiful.
Okay, well, as we say in the classics, we'll see you later, alligator.
See you next week.
Bye.